Hi, Joe. We've already been laughing and giggling off camera, so if you all can hear us and see us jumping in, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. I say this all the time, true transparency, but I am so excited. This is a different level. Like, I've been a fan of yours for years. I found you on Netflix, on that Netflix vacation rental show, and I was like, this woman is amazing, and I want her life. That was the immediate envy. I was like, I want to travel places, and I want to pick if it's a budget option, if it's an adventure option. Anyways, I found you there, and I have been following you since because I thought you were brilliant. I loved your spirit. I loved what you represent as a woman of color in this podcast and how, and not in this podcast, in that show, and just how you show up in the world. And so I was like, you got to come on Black Girl Burnout. You've been on my dream list of guests. So Welcome, Joe Franco. So excited to have you. First, easy question. How are you?
I'm honored. I'm honored of all of these kind words. So crazy. It's, my favorite part about getting to work on camera or posting on social media or whatever is having actual interactions because it seems so one-sided. And I think when you watch somebody hosting a show or when you watch a movie or something that feels so out of reach, you almost lose sight of that two-way conversation. And so these are my favorite moments by far. Thank you for reaching out. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling honored. I was joking. I'm like, I'm not going to say much, Kelly. Got to hit record because I feel like this conversation is going to be juicy and full of really great goodness.
It is. It's about to be juicy. And the next question I always ask folks before we really dive in is to introduce yourself. What do you want people to know? Who is Joe? What do you want us to know about you outside of a bio, which I always read?
Okay, so my identity is very much in the gray area, in the liminal space. So I guess the first thing that I could say about myself is I'm an in-betweener. And I coined this term. The sociological term is third culture kid, which is when you grow up neither here nor there. This is my backstory, and this is the root of everything that I am and everything that I've created in my life and the people that I have conversations with, and not just in-betweener in identity of I'm Brazilian, I was born in Brazil, and I grew up in the States, but also in my career path. I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm also this creative person on camera, and I've done many, many videos on the internet. I'm an in-betweener, first and foremost. I think big, I do crazy things, and I feel like for most of my life, I was very much quiet and shy and became very introspective because I couldn't really find my voice. I grew up in this very small town and I have big curly hair, big brown woman energy, but I didn't know how to externally kind of communicate that. So I was always introspective, introverted, writing. And as I grew up, I started realizing the more I contained who I was always supposed to be, whether it was straightening my hair or trying to look the same or act the same, the sadder I felt. So I kind of started taking these shells off. And now I've made a career in truly externalizing vulnerability and have a journaling company that does this every single day for 4 years now. And I talk about crazy, scary things publicly, just posting the real stuff that I find is important because a lot of times we only see this shiny finished product. We don't see the gooey stuff in the middle that got you to the final project of speaking languages or traveling the world or starting a company.
Yeah, I really think that's important because people, and I love the word, there's so much to unpack there. So one, I love the phrase in-betweener, right? I think a lot of people feel that way. And I think a lot of folks that grow up on the margins of life, whether it's their race or their gender or whatever that is, often feel that way, right? Especially if they're in societies where they're not the majority represented or they're not surrounded. And so the fact that you were able to leverage that vulnerability that perceived by some to be a negative and maybe at times genuinely was, let's be clear, could be difficult. The way that you were able to leverage that into the life that you lead now is one really inspiring. But the steps you took to get there is what's really important to uplift and highlight because you talk about, first the instinct always is to make ourselves smaller and to shrink and to kind of hide. And then I feel like a lot of people tell a very similar story I definitely can relate to this as someone who grew up in a majority white area, small town person, brown woman, multicultural family. Like, I can definitely relate to that. But there comes a point where you can't. Like, you have to make a decision. Like, I either like kill my little spirit and that's the end of it, or I decide the pain of hiding who I am is more intolerable than the potential pain that might be if I be who I am and someone doesn't accept that. And it's that step and that choice that leads to you living a life that is joyful. Like, to me, it feels like it's that decision, which is a big, scary one. Can you tell us a little bit for you about that decision point for you when you're like, I got to take this armor off. I got to let the curls pop. I get to be me. I got to speak multiple languages, whatever that is. Can you tell us a little bit about that moment for you?
When people ask, like, what was the first moment where you really took that scary leap, or what was the decision that you took that was crazy that led, and I think honestly, I'm sure you know this, we're always who we are supposed to be. And that sounds vague and not specific, but what I mean by that is, like, when I think back to even when I was a kid, like a 5-year-old kid, I would ask my grandmother, like, Grandma, why do you always make Grandpa's plate, but he never makes yours? I was a 5-year-old kid questioning things. So
Yeah.
even from as young as 5 to like 8, when I'm in this classroom filled with kids that don't know what I speak and that can't understand me, and I'm completely isolated because I was born and raised in Brazil, and then we moved to the States without knowing any English. And this becomes a survival moment, and people react differently to things like this. And for me, my reaction was, I'm going to learn this language so fast that no one will even know that I'm not from this country. That was my reaction. So it's like I was always this little rule breaking kind of tenacious kid. And it was always very painful. But I felt maybe that was my narrative. Like, talk about psychologically analyzing. When I read my journals, my narrative was, it will never be easy for me. Therefore, I must work harder. And that is just my story, which I think, that has its own double-edged sword, because then you can lead into burnout, because then you think, if it's painful, that means I'm doing it right, which is not necessarily forever. Like, sometimes you need to put in that sacrifice. Sometimes you just got to enjoy what you've created for yourself. A lesson I'm learning now in my beautiful life here in Belgium. But anyways, to kind of answer your question, that my childhood was doing the best I could to make use of the sacrifice that my mom made to bring her 3 kids to the States, making sure that I was the smartest person that I could be, learning the languages, and still trying to fit in as we do as kids. So I fit in, but also was kind of dissecting my superpowers of learning Portuguese. And then I was like, ooh, what if I could learn French? And what if I could learn Italian? And this was all in my small Connecticut town, having these big dreams of living this global life. But I couldn't actually travel because we didn't have our papers. We were waiting for 12 years. So instead of waiting for the moment where I could travel, I started preparing beforehand. Because in my mind, I had this crazy belief that one day I'd be able to travel. And it was so out of reach, because when you grow up with your mom being a nanny and a housekeeper, no one else supporting you, you don't think you're going to actually be able to live a global life. So it was a bit of madness, a bit of self-belief, but also a bit of just, let me find ways to invest my energy and time to gain skills while I'm waiting. And I think that the skills gave me the confidence. It wasn't like I was confident from the beginning. I wasn't confident. But knowing skills that set me apart helped me take on these big, scary decisions and know that I had enough power to learn things if I didn't know them. And that's been the through line.
Yeah, and there's something that you are talking about that's really kind of magical, which is, I talk a lot about that there's joy in the waiting. That a lot of times people wait to build their dream life, and in the waiting, they're like, it's so painful. It's so awful. I'm never going to get there. And you're doubting yourself, and you're like, it's just taking too long. It needs to be here yesterday, you know? And there is something about true success comes when you can find that joy in the waiting for things to happen, because there is no overnight successes. I don't know anybody who has that. And especially when you talk about, you're describing the thought pack, that's what it's like to be a Black woman. It's like, I don't fit in, I'm fitting in, there's a little bit of questioning, and I'm not living a life the way I see other people live. But I know, it's that knowing, I know there's something on the other side of this. And there's joy in the in-between. Like there is joy in that. And that's what you seem to be. It seems like you're leveraging over and over and over again. It's like, I'm not quite there yet, but I could get there and I'm getting ready for it. It's like, I'm going to live a big international life. Maybe not now. Well, my mom's nannying and it feels impossible, but I'm prepping to get there. And it sounds like that's kind of the work you were doing, right?
Absolutely the work. And I feel like you take what you can get. Like maybe it's not an international life because you're getting on planes, but maybe you find a way to learn the language and that becomes a way to become international. And maybe you're not the founder of $1 million company, but you're starting to collaborate with people that give you cool ideas and you bounce off ideas and you create projects. So whether it's in language and relationships and in business, it's always just working towards building brick by brick. And so I love the expression, the waiting, but I don't know if it's even ever waiting. It's just in the building. You're always just building and finding, for me, what's been gratifying in this whole process, because it's not just an identity conversation. This is a career and like fulfilling life conversation. What's been so gratifying is trying to find the most authentic part or thing that I could focus on for the time being. Because there have been times that are not easy, whether it's me being an intern in an internship program where I'm the only person of color, the only woman, the youngest one there, and I just feel totally out of place. And I'm like, where do I fit? How do I fit in here? And then, we can do what it seems like society wants us to do, which is shrink ourselves and fit into this weird mold of the quintessential white man character and being super robotic. Or we could be like, what is a truthful way that I could show up into this experience, learning what I can learn without sacrificing my own magic sauce. The problem, though, with life and society is we don't get taught to even identify what our magic sauce is, which this is a lifelong journey, to be honest, which takes a lot of introspection, a lot of trial and error, and a lot of courage. So from Connecticut, small town, learning French in the classroom and being the kid that writes a letter to the principal to learn Italian too, even though that wasn't allowed, to going to college and studying international business and doing 7 internships and realizing I don't actually want to work for anybody, to studying abroad in Paris and living in a French homestay where I didn't really speak French, starting to make little videos with a college buddy and putting it on YouTube, to making that a full-time career and hitting over 1 million subscribers on a YouTube channel about travel before there were any travel vlogs really as content, to then booking a Netflix show as only the second woman of color ever to host a travel show, to creating a journaling company without ever seeing a journaling company. So I've always been in this, it feels like I'm standing on a cliff and I don't see what's out there. It's all fog. But the willingness to go down there and explore it and make what I can make happen and iterate and do imperfect work, but have collaborations along the way, that is way more gratifying to me than shriveling everything that makes me me. And so when I see people in the world struggling to find their authentic voice, I genuinely want to help them with tools and resources and even having just conversations, because sometimes it's easier for others to see our magic sauce than it is for us to see it in ourselves.
100%. And it sounds like it's 1 part imagination and 2 parts action, right? It's like it's that combination of those 2 things. And I think, I can really relate, and I feel like the audience will really relate to, like like I said, I'm from a very small town. Did not grow up rich, did not see possibilities, and I always had a very international thought. I always had dreams. That was really what it is. I had a really big, bold imagination beyond my little spot, beyond where I was. I could see I'm going to be somewhere else, or I'm going to do something different. And so it was that piece unlocking, which some people don't ever get to do. And then the second part was like, you have to do work. Like, and in between that, I was also a person. It's like, oh, if someone told me no, I'm going to be like, well, I'm just going to do it and do it really well. And then I'm going to write a letter and I'm going to like say, no, you're going to put me in this group, or I'm going to do this. Oh, no one's done this before. Oh, I'll do it. I'll try it. Right. It's action again. And what I mean by like the joy and the waiting is like, maybe you have a big goal and you're like, well, on the way to that goal, you're busy. That's where the joy comes in. It's like, you're not just sitting waiting, like staring at your dream. You're busy. And so in that waiting for the big thing to happen, you're doing all these small things that are so enjoyable. And to that point, I want us to come back and continue the conversation, because I think this beautifully segues into, how do you channel imagination in action? You might want to try journaling. So let's come back and talk about the transformative power of journaling with Joe Franco. Tune in. We're going to keep the conversation going.
Can't wait.